The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Andy Peau worked at InterVarsity Press for over 40 years, most of that time as associate publisher. He's the author of Write Better, in which he applies his decades of experience to practical questions of craft and art in writing, as well as the spiritual aspects of the writing life. In his blog, Andy Unedited, he explores the world of books and offers thoughts on writing, publishing, leadership, scholarship, editing, history, biblical studies, and life. Andy Peau, thank you so much for being on the Habit Podcast. I appreciate you making time for me.
Glad to be here.
So when did Write Better come out?
Came out just about a year ago. So
Okay.
yeah, September in 2019. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it's been exactly 12 months now.
And you've been blogging for what, 10 years now?
10, 15 years. Yeah, for quite a while. Yeah, I've been running a blog, Andy Unedited. And so it's my take on the world of publishing, books I've been reading, things that have to do with writing, or just whatever else life throws at me.
Once a week for 10 years?
Yeah. I've been pretty much once a week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes twice a month, but pretty much on average every week.
How do you keep the ideas flowing for 500 blog posts?
Well, there's a couple things that I do. One is that I found that when I am in conversation with other people, that generates ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just realized I need to stay in conversation with people, whether it's in conversation through books I'm reading, but more often direct conversations that I have with folks, either in person or going to hear somebody give a talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that those stimulate ideas in me, because I find myself kind of responding internally with something that either I agree with that or I disagree with that, or it just kind of spins off a new idea that the speaker or my conversation partner isn't really focused on, but it generates an associative idea for me. And so I just try to keep track of those things. And I've got it's not very fancy. It's just a Word document.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, every time an idea comes, I throw that in there.
Yeah.
And that helps me.
Yeah. So you have a whole section in your book, Write Better, about generating ideas or creativity, and I really found that a very helpful couple of chapters. And one thing I hadn't given much thought to before was the role of physical exercise in creativity. And you quoted some or cited some scientific research. I think you said like the one thing that was sort of that every the one factor that people who were generative shared was physical exercise. In some study.
We are whole people. We are body, soul, and spirit, and mind, and emotions, and we're all integrated into one. And every part of us affects the other. If we get sick, that affects our emotions. And if we become sad or depressed, that can affect us physically. So it goes both ways. I have found that in my own personal life that when I'm exercising, my mind works better. And not that it works so well all the time, but it works better than it would if I weren't. And so, for 30 years, I would run, 3-4 times a week. My knees are bad now. After 30 years, they've finally given out, but I bike, I go biking, or I'll take a vicious walk for 45 minutes. And that I think has been very important in helping me stay focused. And in the book Write Better, I tell the story about Bobby Fischer, the international chess grandmaster, and one of his innovations was that he would exercise regularly. He'd play tennis, he'd lift weights, he'd do all of this stuff, and grandmasters just did not do that. They sat in their chairs and looked at chessboards. But during a tournament, he would take time off, get away, and exercise. And what that allowed him to do was to stay really focused, hyper alert through a 4 and 5 hour chess match, which is physically very demanding, very draining. And so he was sharp at the end of a match where his opponent would be lagging in energy, and he would take advantage of that. And he'd win games that most people would be aiming for a draw at that point. So, and yes, there's there's scientific research that physical exercise actually helps create new neurons in your brain. And so it has a very physical impact on your brain as well.
Yes. Thank you. But I could put my finger on what the one thing that we know grows new neurons for adults is exercise. Right? That's exercise.
Scientists used to think that, you're kind of born with a certain set of neurons and that's it for life. But no, it's been shown in the last 20 years that exercise actually can do that when people thought before that it was a static factor in life.
Yeah. By the way, when you do exercise, when you get on your bike, do you listen to podcasts and books on tape, or is it silence?
No, I don't. I've thought about that, and I know a lot of people do. And I do listen to podcasts, and I do books on tape and audiobooks and so forth. I do that, but mostly when I drive. But I don't do that when I'm exercising. What I find is it actually helps me. It gives me opportunity for my brain to go in other directions. And there have been times when an idea will occur to me, and I'll kind of write a blog, for example, in my head, because an idea kind of struck me. And while podcasts and books are obviously good fodder for new ideas and creativity, I find it gives me some mental space and a little bit of an open area so that my brain can be functioning and thinking about other things besides always having input. I've got time to kind of organize and mull through new things.
Yeah, I'm always glad when I do exercise without listening to anything, but because, as you said, I process and make connections, make progress on whatever I'm thinking about or working on. And yet I find that I rarely will actually go do it if I don't reward myself with a book on tape or an audiobook or a podcast or something. I've kind of associate those things. If I'm going to exercise, then I get to listen to something.
Absolutely. Exercise should be a no guilt activity, and you shouldn't feel, make it even harder. I actually like it because I feel like I'm more in touch with the wind and the sunshine and the trees, and I have more of a sense of being outside, and I like that. But if listening to something helps you exercise, by all means, listen to something.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean for this conversation to turn into a conversation about exercise, but I especially in the section on creativity in your book, that was one thing that really stood out to me as something I'd never given a lot of thought to. I mean, I knew in general it's good to sort of be crisp. It makes you a little, I know it's good to exercise, but that research about the neurons was especially interesting to me.
Right.
But I also want to talk about voice, because that's something else you talk about in this book. Mm-hmm. Voice is so important. Developing a voice or getting in touch with your voice is so important for writers. And I know, when I talk to editors or hear people who have talked about editors, who've talked to editors, a recurring theme is something editors are looking for is a unique voice. And then the next question is, where do you get a unique voice?
Right.
And I'd like to hear some of you. You've been editing for a long time.
I've been an editor for over 40 years. Yeah.
40 years. Wow. Have you been at InterVarsity Press that whole time?
My professional career, I was at InterVarsity Press, although I retired about 4.5 years ago. I've been
I'm sorry,
freelancing since then.
Yeah. So what do you mean when you talk about a unique voice? What is it that you're listening for?
Well, there's a positive and a negative, if you will, aspect to it. The positive side is, I think readers can get hung up on trying to sound like somebody else, and that can kind of constrict them and keep them from writing, because they feel they can't do it very well, or they can't do it right, or the way they want to, and maybe somebody they admire or like, and they're trying to sound like somebody else for whatever reason. Maybe they're trying to sound academic and sophisticated, and they're having trouble doing that, or maybe they're having trouble sounding casual, and but they're trying to do that, and they can't do it. We should not try to imitate another writer, because we're going to do a bad job of it. Frankly, we're just not going to do as good a job as the person we're trying to imitate. We should just try to relax and be ourselves, sound like ourselves, and whatever that is, that's fine. We should try to learn from other writers. We should try to observe, what are they doing that's working? How did they use that metaphor? How did they organize the material so that it was so dramatic? Or how did they use humor? Those kinds of things we should learn from, but then do it the way that we're comfortable with, or that makes sense for us. So I think in terms of voice, I don't want writers to get uptight about it. I just want writers to relax and not feel that their 7th grade English teacher is leaning over their shoulder and trying to make them write a certain way, or whatever. They should just write and relax, and that's the key in that regard.
I think,
on the other hand,
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, voice, like so many other issues of writing, I feel like a lot of times it's a matter of sort of like clearing the desk. All these things you've accumulated that you thought you're supposed to do this, you thought you're supposed to sound like that. I teach writing a good bit, and I feel like a lot of what I'm doing is just helping people sort of clear the desk or scrape the barnacles off I don't know what the right metaphor is, but basically saying there's something under there that's your voice, which
right.
May need some development, but
Yeah.
you need to know what you need to be able to distinguish between you and all these accretions that have accreted
Yes.
on your voice. And
absolutely. Yeah, writers and I include myself here, we all have this tendency to have these layers of expectations thrown on us in terms of what good writing means, and a lot of that is what we learned in school that we have to unlearn and just relax. Like you can't write an incomplete sentence. That a sentence fragment is illegal, or starting a sentence with a conjunction is illegal. Don't do that. And so we've got all these rules in our heads. Yeah. We just need to relax and just write and forget about that stuff. Go back and fix it later if we need to or want to, but not when we're drafting. At the same time, I said there was a positive and a negative on voice. So the flip side of it is I think we can get too focused on voice, too obsessed with, I've got to have my own particular unique voice. And that's not the issue. The issue is relaxing and being yourself. And if voice comes, that's great. That's fine.
Yeah.
But don't worry about it. Voice is not the ultimate goal for a writer. I think writing for others, writing that others may flourish, writing to find or to explore goodness, truth, and beauty. Yeah. That's the ultimate goal for writing. And voice is it's a tool. It's a pathway that can help get you there. And if it's a problem, then lay it aside and don't worry about it because that's not what your primary focus is.
Yeah. The more you're thinking about voice, the less of your authentic voice is coming out, I should think, as you're composing.
Yeah, you become too self-conscious. Yeah. And then it looks forced, or stilted or not actually who you are.
And we know this in real life, in real conversation, when somebody's thinking about, their self-presentation, they begin to sound like something besides themselves, right? They become a curated version of themselves that doesn't feel like their real selves. And so at a dinner party, as people get a little self-forgetful, then they start to sound like themselves. Their real voice comes out. So in your chapter on voice, you bring up T.S. Eliot and T.S. Eliot's essay, and now I can't remember the name of the essay, but about tradition. And yes. I want to talk about that a little bit because our tradition. I don't care how individual you are still coming out of a tradition. The tradition you're coming out of, the things you've read, the things you have familiarized yourself with, shapes who you are and therefore shapes your voice. So I'd like to hear you talk about why you even brought up tradition in a chapter about voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, T.S. Eliot, the poet from the last century, he wrote a number of essays as well on literature and literary criticism, and one of his most famous was this one on tradition and the individual talent. And there he says, kind of counterintuitively, that you're not going to be unique. You're building on the past. Every writer builds on the past, builds on the tradition. And he was, of course, thinking of the Western literary European tradition. But whatever your tradition is, you're building on a tradition. And it's not going to be totally you. It's not going to be totally fresh. Nothing is ever completely unique. And we need to recognize that we're building on what has come before us, give thanks for that, and move forward. And he says what the artist does, or what a writer does, is try to make a contribution to the tradition, try to add to it or give it a little twist or help us see it in a slightly different perspective, or combine things that haven't been combined before in the tradition, but help us move forward and see things afresh. So the purpose is not to be totally unique, totally new individual, but to build on what has come before us.
I think that's really freeing, right? To say, and the truth is, if you're it only takes one or two unusual ideas to make a whole thing feel like it's unique.
Absolutely.
I mean, the truth is, if your whole thing was unique, it would just feel nonsensical. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, Harry Potter, there is so much there that she's building on. A huge treasure trove of tradition and old stories and motifs and images that she's building together. But she gives this nice little twist about a train that goes off to this kind of imaginary school somewhere in northern England, and all of a sudden we've got a new fresh story. But it's just saturated with tradition.
Yeah, no, I love that example. I mean, that feels like a really fresh, unique story. And as you said, it is. You got this iceberg worth of tradition, of reworking other things, and it just really doesn't take that much unique stuff to feel really fresh and unique. And you do talk in this book a good bit about the idea that creativity is just a matter of putting together things that we don't normally put together. But there's the raw material is all, we're not creating ex nihilo, right? I mean, we're just recombining things.
Yeah, creativity is combining two things that already exist, but that haven't been combined before, or haven't been combined in a particular way before. That's creativity, and it to me that demystifies creativity, which can seem so magical and mystical, but it's really a very concrete kind of thing that happens, a transaction that happens. And so the way we can increase our creativity is by making sure we are increasing the number of different kinds of ideas and associations and experiences and facts that are part of our learning, part of our living. The more input we have, then the more opportunity we have for combining things that haven't been combined before.
Yeah. The good news is we all have seen a different. The things I've seen are different from the things you've seen. Whether you are smarter than me or more creative than me or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just things I've seen are just different from the things you've seen. And as I offer up those things to the world, they are almost by definition unique.
Yeah, right. We all have a different set of experiences and information and learning that is different than anybody else's. And so, we have the opportunity to do something creative that somebody hasn't done before.
Yeah. I want to moving on to another topic that you talk about in your book. I spend a lot of time when I'm talking to writers, I emphasize the importance of self-forgetfulness. That somehow when you can quit thinking about yourself, you then step into, you start doing the interesting work that you were, really hoping you would do. And yet you say something that I don't think these things are contradictory. So I want to talk through them. You say that all writing is autobiography.
Right.
And what do you mean? Can you talk about what you mean by that? And is that different from me saying try to be self-forgetful, or are these things consonant?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think both things are true, and we have to hold them in tension. When I say all writing is autobiographical, I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but basically what we write comes out from ourselves. It comes out from what we have learned, from our own experiences, from our imagination. It comes from within. And so it has something to do with us, one way or another. Even if we are creating a sewing machine repair manual, well, it's about our experience of repairing sewing machines or building sewing machines or taking them apart or using them, whatever. It comes out of our autobiographical experience at some level.
Yeah.
And so everything we write is autobiographical, has that origin. And writing is, of course, a very solitary experience. We normally do it in chunks by ourselves. Other people come into the process at various points, but a lot of it is on our own. And so that makes it a very solitary, self-focused experience. And so you're absolutely right. Given that is the context of writing, that it's autobiographical, we're doing it by ourselves, we're on our own, that means then there comes a point where, yes, we have to kind of like unload all that, forget all that, and try to get beyond it and let the story carry us, or let the ideas carry us, so that we can move forward with those and not be so focused on what's going on inside of our own person, which can, of course, inhibit the writing process itself.
Yeah. I think that, to me, the way that these two ideas fit together that seem contradictory is, given the fact that all writing is autobiographical, take that as a given, and now, focus your attention on what's outside yourself. But again, we've touched on this already. The fact that that there's something coming, that I'm bringing my whole self to this, and my experiences, which are different from your experiences and everybody else's experiences. There's a real comfort / confidence in knowing, that this is all, that I don't have to, it doesn't create some superhuman effort to be creative, interesting, unique, because my experience is unique and specific, and therefore it's almost like I have to, depending on where I am in the process, do I need to remember that this is autobiographical, or do I need to pay more attention to forgetting about myself? And as I sort of learn to sort of move back and forth between those two poles, good things start to happen.
Right. Exactly. So. Yeah. No, I'm with you 100% on that.
And you also have so kind of what we're in some ways what we're talking about when I mentioned confidence, and trusting my own, what's going on inside me as a writer. That does bump up against the idea of humility, right? When we think of confidence and humility, we think of those things together. And I know you touch on humility in Write Better. So, what's the role of humility in the writer's life?
Yeah, humility, confidence, pride, self-forgetfulness, all of these things kind of swirl together in a writer, and it's again, because writing is autobiographical and it's done alone, it's hard for us to get out of that. I think confidence can come from experience, where we see what works and what doesn't. We keep trying, and we begin to learn just because people respond positively when in a certain way, and that gives us courage to keep writing, to keep trying to put things out for others to read and appreciate. Humility comes from, we've always got something to learn. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in learning things. One of the joys of my existence is to be a lifelong learner. I love learning things. I love not just learning information, but I love learning how to do things or how to think about things. I love learning, and so those kinds of things, again, are ways to help us get out from ourselves, from being so completely inwardly focused. I love C.S. Lewis's definition of humility being someone who has designed the most beautiful cathedral in the whole world and is as glad about that cathedral as if someone else had done it.
Yeah.
Or would be as glad about that cathedral if someone else had done it. That's a really positive, upbeat way to look at humility, I think.
That is great. I love it.
The better.
So that's a hard place to get to.
It is. And I think that, there's a lot of little tricks that every writer, I think, tries to use to try to get there. One of the things I try to do is I try to think of writing as my job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the ultimate expression of my self-identity or something, that's laden with emotion. It's just, I try to take the emotion out of it and just think, nope, I've got a job to do. I've got to produce X number of words by such and such a date and get them out there. And they're for somebody else. They're not for me. They're for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so I've got a boss that says, this is what's needed, and I do it.
Yeah.
And thinking of writing as my job, even if I'm not getting paid for it directly, it just helps take the emotion out of it, take the about me issue out of it, and helps me to move forward. Because I'm writing for somebody else. I'm not writing for me. I'm writing for somebody else. Yes, I'm writing for me, of course, sure. Yeah. But if I can trick myself into thinking, as it were, that I'm writing for somebody else, which I really am. I mean, it's not just a trick. It really is truly part of the process. It's for their benefit so that they can flourish or that they can accomplish what they want to. Then it takes me out of the equation, at least somewhat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that idea of how would I feel about this if somebody else wrote it or made it, is so incredibly helpful. For one thing, it's helpful in that question of kill your darlings. How do you know which darlings to kill as a writer? Well,
right.
The question is, why do I love this sentence that I just wrote? Do I love it because I like the way it makes me feel about myself or the way it's going to present me to somebody else? And if somebody else wrote it, what would I think? Would I think this person is being self-indulgent or this person is being irrelevant? But if I read that sentence and go, I would love that sentence if somebody else wrote it, then don't kill that darling. Keep that darling belong.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think most writers are like that they when they read something that they really like, it's just like, man, isn't that good? Ooh, wow. Yeah. That sentence works. That paragraph sings. So let's rejoice in that. And if that happens to come from your pen or from typing your on the keyboard, it's just as much fun.
Yeah. Now, everybody who tells the truth beautifully is an ally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
All right, I have a next to last question for you. Because I have the same last question every time, but this is my penultimate question, and it's
okay.
I'm always interested in hearing from editors. How do you help a writer? I mean, this may be just too big of a question, but how do you help a writer be their best without you hijacking their work? Right? I mean. How do you help them be better without it suddenly becoming Andy LaPeau instead of that writer?
Yeah. And I think I tended to. No. I think I tended to do that when I was a new editor, a young editor. I think I tended to make everybody sound like me, and it took me a while. I mean, I had my mentors who were editors say, don't do that. But I still had the tendency, so I was guided in the right way, but it's hard to overcome that desire. But I think, yes, one thing that's helped me is I think of my job as posing questions to the author. And it's the author's job to answer those questions. And once I've posed the question, I've done my job. I'm done, in a way. In the sense that my responsibility is to raise the question, make sure the author's thought about it from all angles, is aware of the repercussions of doing it this way or that way, but then it's the author's choice. So I guide, but I try to also give freedom to the authors to do it the way they want. So I will be an advocate for the reader to the author. So if I feel like the author is being unclear or misleading or is in some way could throw the reader off, I try to be an advocate for the reader to the author. But then once I've pointed that out, it's up to the author to decide whether or not they want to fix it or not. The other thing to keep in mind is there's a difference, at least in with a book editor or if it's in a book publishing or a magazine publishing, blog publishing process, a website, and that is before acceptance and after acceptance. There's two different things going on. Before a book is accepted for publication, I can say, well, we could publish the book if you do it this way, but if you do it the other way, we can't do it. So it's up to you. But it's your choice. Do you want to publish it with us or not? If you do, let's do it plan A. If you're really committed to plan B, that's fine, but do it plan B. So even there, I'm giving the author a choice. But then after the contract's been signed and say, hey, we're going to do this book, then much more authority, I feel, goes to the author, or should, as long as the author is listening to the editor and really taking seriously the advice that's being given, which I think all authors should do, even though it's ultimately their choice. I think they need to give serious attention to what an editor says. Some authors will tell me, yeah, an editor's right 90% of the time. Or they'll tell me, oh, editors are right 50% of the time. Or they'll say, well, editors are right 20% of the time. They have different gauges and maybe different experiences. But I think whatever percentage an author thinks an editor is right, it is to their benefit to always take the input seriously.
I love that idea of the editor being an advocate for the reader to the writer. That's an excellent answer to my question. Okay, last question, Andy.
Sure.
Who are the writers that make you want to write?
There's writers I like. There's writers I enjoy that get my juices going. And I suppose every once in a while I say, yeah, man, I'd like to do it like that. But again, I try to do it whatever works for me. But among contemporary writers, I like David Brooks. In ways he's not the best writer in the world, but he's a good writer and he's always got good ideas. Really interesting stuff.
Week after week.
Andy,
I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, week after week he does it in his columns. His books are good. So Malcolm Gladwell, I like his stuff as well. He really, really knows how to spin a story and draw out some rather profound things from his journalistic efforts. He's a journalist in the very, very, very best sense, and a storyteller. But he's always got a deeper level in terms of what does it mean to be human? That's kind of going on underneath his work. So those are a couple people. In terms of fiction, there's a couple books. One book I've read years ago that I still just admire so much, by Mary Doria Russell, called The Sparrow.
Huh. I don't know that book.
And I almost never reread a book. I read it once, and that's this book I've read 3 times. I'd gladly read it a fourth.
Yeah, really.
It's a fabulous book, The Sparrow. The characters are so well drawn. It's like, man, I would love to spend a year with these people. These are such great people. I'd like to spend a lot of time with them. But also very profound theological implications to the storyline.
When was this book written?
Probably 20 years ago, is my guess. It's got the most unlikely premise, but it works. I mean, she is a master. She's just a master.
Well, you have inspired me. I want to go find this book and read it.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, since we've been talking, a Kindle got dropped off on my doorstep. I've never had a Kindle before, and now I have one. Okay. So maybe I'll get The Sparrow on it.
Yeah. It's terrific, challenging, but terrific, and very readable.
Right.
And a more recent book is Amor Towl's book, Gentleman in Moscow.
Isn't that a great book?
It is.
It's so fun.
I just thoroughly enjoyed it all the way through.
Yeah.
And again, the characters are terrific. I guess I'm more, character-driven books are more to my taste than purely plot-driven. Both books have a very adequate plot in my mind, though probably The Gentleman in Moscow maybe a little bit less than The Sparrow, but nonetheless, both of them are just very delightful. And again, they all touch this deep issue of what does it mean to be human, and who should we be in extreme circumstances. Both books deal with that question, because the extreme circumstances often reveal who we really are. Those are some authors and books that I really get.
Great.
You can tell, I guess, just the way I'm talking about them. They really get my juices going.
Yeah. All right, Andy LaPeau, thank you so much for being on the Habit Podcast. It's great to meet you, and I hope we can talk again soon.
It's been good to talk with you and to meet you as well. Thank you very much.
Right. See you later.
The Rabbit Room has partnered with Lipscomb University to make this podcast possible. Lipscomb has graciously given us access to their recording studio in the Center for Entertainment and Arts building. We're so grateful for their sponsorship, their encouragement, and the good work they do in Nashville. Special shout out as well to Jess Ray for letting us use her song Too Good as part of this podcast. Visit jessraymusic.com to hear more of her beautiful songs.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
This podcast was produced by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. All our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.